The Arizona sun sagged low over the pine-brushed hills, casting a molten orange across the dry ridges of the Mogollon Rim. The year was 1884, and the land had long forgotten gentleness. Coyotes howled their hunger into the dusk, while dust settled like memory on the shoulders of a man named Thomas Carver. Tom was not a man for many words. Tall, with broad shoulders and hands worn raw by axe handles and time, he lived in a modest shack beside a clearing he and the other lumberjacks had carved from the wilderness. Each evening, he cooked alone by his fire, letting the silence soak into his bones like the scent of pine sap. He didn't mind the solitude, it kept the ghosts quiet. But that evening, just as the stew in his battered tin pot began to bubble, he heard a sound that wasn't wind or wood or beast. A soft rustle, followed by a sharp sniffle. Tom stood and turned, squinting through the lengthening shadows. That's when he saw him, a boy, maybe 9 years old, barefoot, thin as winter's memory. His skin was the color of the canyon stone, and his eyes, wide and black, held more sorrow than a child should bear. He said nothing, just stood at the edge of the firelight, staring. Tom's instincts tensed. Apache, he thought. And with that came every warning he'd ever heard in the camps. They'll steal your tools, cut your throat in the night, bring spirits down on your land. But the boy looked more ghost than threat, ribs showing beneath a dirty tunic, lips cracked, legs shaking. The stew hissed softly as it boiled over the edge. "Hungry?" Tom asked, his voice rough from disuse. The boy didn't respond, just stared, one hand clutching his side. Tom hesitated, then ladled a generous portion into a tin bowl and set it near the fire, not too close. He backed away. The boy crept forward, step by hesitant step, until he knelt and scooped the food with trembling hands. He didn't speak, didn't thank him, just ate until the bowl was clean, then stood and vanished into the trees, silent as he'd come. Tom stood there long after the fire died down. Something in that child's silence clung to the night like smoke. He'd seen orphans before, victims of raids, droughts, diseases, but never had he seen eyes like that, full of grief and something deeper, something ancient. The next morning, Tom found the empty bowl sitting on a stump, scrubbed clean with river sand. If this story has already drawn you in, don't forget to subscribe for more gripping tales of the Old West. Tom didn't expect to see the boy again. The wilderness had a way of swallowing things whole, sounds, people, memories. But 3 days later, just before noon, he caught sight of a small figure crouched on a ridge above the clearing, still and watchful, like a deer. In his hands, the boy held something. Tom kept chopping wood, trying not to startle him. The boy lifted his hands toward the sky, and from them a hawk sprang, silent, wings outstretched. The bird circled once above the pines, then soared into the sun's glare. When Tom looked back, the boy was gone again. That night, the campfire circle was restless with talk. "Spotted one of them Apache kids again," said Eli, a burly man with red cheeks and sharp eyes. "Near my tools." Coyote was marking them for the rest of his clan. A few others nodded. "Time we teach 'em this land ain't theirs no more," someone muttered. Tom didn't speak. He knew the dangers of being seen as sympathetic. Even a whisper of siding with the tribes could make you an outcast in camp, or worse. But deep down he felt the accusation sting. That boy hadn't looked like a scout. He'd looked hungry. Lost. The next morning, a pair of lumberjacks found strange marks carved into a pine near the cabin perimeter. Slanted lines, crescent shapes, what looked like a bird's foot. "It's a curse," said Eli. "Their way of marking who they're going to take next." Tom walked out to see for himself. The carvings were deep but oddly graceful, not hasty, not threatening. Something about them struck a chord he couldn't explain. He ran his fingers over one of the symbols and suddenly felt heat crawl up his spine. Not fear, something older, something like recognition. That evening, while mending a broken axe handle, Tom found himself thinking about the boy's eyes, how they never pleaded, only observed. He remembered other eyes like that, long ago. During a raid when he was young, settlers had taken refuge near the Salt River. Tom's sister didn't survive. He was taught that Apache hands held her death, but things weren't so clear anymore. A child was a child. Hunger was hunger. And the land didn't care for the color of a man's skin. It only respected those who listened. Later, while feeding his fire, Tom saw a feather. It lay atop the same stump where the bowl had been left days before. A long black hawk feather, placed carefully, not dropped. He didn't pick it up. He just stared at it as the flames danced, wondering what the boy was trying to say, and why his silence spoke so loudly. The fire started just before dawn. Tom awoke to shouting and the thick, acrid smell of smoke clawing through the air. He rushed outside, boots half laced, and saw flames licking at the edge of the tool shed. Men scrambled with buckets, cursing and hollering, shadows dancing in the flickering orange light. By the time the fire was put out, half the tools were ruined, saws warped, handles scorched, iron twisted. No one was hurt, but the damage was deep, the kind that stirs anger louder than words. "They did it," Eli spat, gripping a blackened shovel. "Damn Apaches, they've been watching us for weeks, leaving marks, now they're striking." Tom didn't speak right away. His mind reeled through the smoke, through memories of the feather, the boy's hollow cheeks, the hawk. It didn't fit. The boy hadn't looked vengeful. He'd looked alone. "You didn't see who lit it," Tom finally said. Eli turned on him. "We don't need to. Who else would sneak in without a sound, strike like that and vanish? You saw that kid. I say we smoke 'em out before they burn us all." Murmurs of agreement rumbled through the men. One of them muttered something about bringing rifles next time. Tom's jaw clenched. He was just a kid, starving. I gave him food, that's all. That silenced them. All eyes shifted. "You what?" Eli asked slowly. Tom felt the weight of their stares. He didn't speak, just ate and left. "That's why we're being hit. You fed the scout." "I don't think he was a scout. You think too much, Carver." The rest of the day passed in a tense, heavy quiet. No one spoke to Tom. No one shared their lunch. His axe was moved from the common rack. The air had turned, and it was colder than the mountain wind. By nightfall, Tom sat alone, nursing a bruised pride and worse doubts. He'd always kept to himself, kept his head down. He never imagined one bowl of stew could redraw the lines between him and the others so violently. He tried to shake it off, but when he closed his eyes, he dreamed. In the dream, smoke twisted into the shape of a bear, massive and slow, its eyes glowing like coals. Behind it, the boy knelt, crying softly. The bear circled him protectively, keeping the shadows at bay. When Tom awoke, the image clung to his thoughts like dew on pine needles. He stood, walked to the stump where the feather still rested, and sat beside it. He didn't know what the boy wanted. He didn't even know if the boy would return, but deep in his gut he felt something was coming, and it would change everything. The trail was barely a whisper through the pines, no more than a suggestion between rock and brush. But Tom followed it anyway. Something deep inside urged him on, the kind of instinct that didn't answer to reason. He left before dawn, a rifle slung across his back more for peace of mind than protection. He hiked toward the mesa, where the earth rose like the spine of a buried beast, ancient and sun-scorched. That was the last place he'd seen the boy, beyond the ridge, where the forest gave way to red rock and wind-swept silence. It took hours. The heat came up fast, and his boots scraped against gravel and twisted root. When he reached the top, the land opened wide before him, nothing but sky and stone, and the ghost of a wind that carried no scent, no sound. He didn't find the boy, but he found the art. Etched into the side of a sandstone wall were shapes, dozens of them, drawn in faded ochre and coal-black pigment. Figures of men and animals, hunters and beasts, sun symbols and birds in flight. One image stood out, a man with pale skin reaching his hand toward a smaller figure, while a hawk soared overhead. Tom stared at it for a long time. Something shifted in the air. He turned and saw nothing, but his heart thudded differently, quicker, heavier. He took a step back, then another, and the ground beneath him blurred. The sky darkened, not with clouds, but with shadow. The wind howled with a voice that wasn't wind. Then the world twisted. He was no longer on the mesa. He stood in a wide, empty space, surrounded by a ring of smoke. From the haze stepped figures, warriors, elders, faces painted with ash. Their eyes glowed like coals, And yet they looked through him, not at him. Then came the boy, barefoot, eyes calm, a hawk perched on his shoulder. Tom opened his mouth, but no words came. The boy raised a hand and pointed to a mark drawn in the earth between them, a spiral with a line through it. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Then a voice echoed, not from the boy, not from the warriors, but from somewhere deeper. Taklishim. The name rang through Tom's chest like a drumbeat. The smoke twisted again, and the vision collapsed inward. He blinked and was back on the mesa, hands on his knees, gasping for breath. The petroglyphs remained silent and still. He didn't know what he'd seen. Vision? Madness? But the name echoed in his ears, refusing to fade. Taklishim. The boy had a name now, and that changed everything. It was just past sundown when the shouting began. Tom was returning from the mesa, legs sore, mind tangled with the name still echoing inside him. Taklishim. As he neared the camp, he saw the men gathered in a tight circle near the edge of the clearing. A figure lay on the ground, groaning, clutching his thigh. Blood soaked the leg of his trousers. An arrow jutted out from the meat of his leg, wood splintered, the feathers dark with dirt. Apache, Eli growled, pacing like a caged animal. They're escalating. First the fire, now this. We wait any longer, we'll be next. Tom stepped closer, heart hammering. Was anyone else hurt? No, spat one of the younger men, but that arrow could have killed Will. He's lucky it hit where it did. Eli stood tall, voice cutting through the gathering dusk. We ride at dawn. There's a camp not 2 miles east. Been spotted by trappers there behind this. Tom's mouth dried. You don't know that. We know enough, Eli snapped. You think they're just going to stop? They're animals. They understand one thing, fear. We'll burn their hides and make 'em remember who owns this land now. Tom stepped forward. You burn that camp, you kill women, children, maybe even that boy. Eli's eyes narrowed. You mean the one you fed? The one who brought this on us? Murmurs flared again. Tension crackled like a snapped branch. I don't believe he did this, Tom said. And I sure as hell won't ride out to murder innocents. Then get out of our way. Tom looked at the wounded man. Will's face was pale, twisted in pain. The arrow had been real. The fear in the others was real too. But something about it didn't add up. If the Apache wanted blood, they wouldn't leave a man alive. This felt like warning, not war. That night, Tom didn't sleep. He watched the fire burn low, and when the others drifted into their tents, sharpening blades and checking rifles, he packed what he needed: canteen, dried meat, his old boots. He wrapped the hawk feather in a cloth and slipped it into his coat pocket. He knew what he had to do. Before first light, he saddled his mule and rode north toward the canyon where the sun struck early and the trees grew sparse. He didn't know what he would say, or how the tribe would receive him, but if there was even a chance the boy, Taklishim, was part of that camp and the others planned to march in with guns drawn, then Tom had no choice. He had to warn them. Because blood spilled in fear never dried clean. The trail narrowed as the trees gave way to hard stone and scrub. Tom rode fast, cutting across dry riverbeds and broken ridges, each hoofbeat echoing louder in his chest. The air smelled of dust and heat, and the sun climbed fast, cruel and unflinching. He hadn't seen another soul since dawn. Then came the sound, a sharp whistle, high and brief. Before he could reach for his rifle, the world shifted, a blur of motion. Then a blow to the side of his head. The mule brayed, and Tom hit the ground hard. He opened his eyes to spears pointed at his chest. Several Apache warriors stood over him, faces painted in rust and coal. They said nothing at first, just watched, eyes unreadable. Tom didn't move. His head throbbed, mouth full of copper. One of them stepped forward, an older man with a jagged scar along his cheek. His voice was quiet but firm. Why are you here? Tom licked his lips. To warn you. The man raised an eyebrow. There's a raid coming from the lumber camp. They think you attacked one of our men. They're wrong, but they're coming. Stillness. Then the older man nodded slowly. You are Carver. Tom's heart jumped. How do you know my name? You were a boy near the Salt River. You spared my sister when others did not, you remember?" Tom's mind jolted. He had been just 13. His father had made him stand watch during that raid, and when they found a wounded woman behind a collapsed barn, he'd turned away and lied. Said the place was clear. "I remember," he said, voice low. The older man looked into the trees, then gave a brief signal. The other warriors lowered their weapons. "You walk a strange path, Carver, the kind that goes between two worlds. That is not easy." "I didn't come for thanks, just to help." "You came because of the boy." Tom nodded. "Taklishim." That made the warriors pause. The name settled like dust. A figure emerged from the shadows, small, silent, familiar. Taklishim stepped forward, no longer fearful, his eyes steady. The hawk feather was braided into his hair now. Tom knelt. "I didn't know your name before, but I heard it." The boy studied him, then spoke clearly for the first time. "You gave when you had no reason. That is the way of the strong." The older man looked at the others. "We will move, but we will not run. If your men come with fire, they will find only silence." Tom stood. "I'll do what I can to stop them." The elder placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you are welcome here." For the first time in days, Tom breathed deep. But the dust in the wind tasted like the edge of a storm. That night, Tom sat among the tribe beside a low-burning fire, the flames soft against the desert wind. No one spoke much. Conversation here wasn't wasted on noise. It flowed through gesture, shared glances, the passing of food and smoke. A piece of venison was handed to him, seasoned with herbs he didn't know, rich and earthy. He took it with quiet gratitude. Taklishim sat beside him, chewing slowly. The boy's posture had changed, less wary, more grounded. His silence no longer felt like distance, but observation. He was watching Tom, yes, but not to measure danger, to measure truth. Across the fire, an elder woman crushed roots in a stone bowl. A young girl painted symbols on the inside of a leather hide. There was no panic here, no fear. Only preparation. Tom turned to the older man, the one who had recognized him. "You said you would move. Why stay so calm?" The man's eyes remained on the fire. "We have seen worse storms than this. When the wind shifts, we shift too. But we do not scatter. We leave signs. We protect what matters." "And the boy?" Tom asked. "Taklishim is the last of his line. His father was killed 2 winters ago by trappers. His mother died of sickness before that. He has wandered much, seen death more than play." Tom looked at the boy again, so small, and yet he'd carried himself through the woods alone, faced hunger and strangers, whispered to hawks, carried his own name like armor. "He's strong," Tom said. The older man nodded. "And he remembers kindness." "That's stronger still." Later, Taklishim guided Tom through the edge of the camp. He pointed out plants used for wounds, for fever, for sleep. He said the names softly in his own tongue. Tom repeated them, clumsy but willing. The boy smiled once, just once, but it stayed with him. As they walked, Tom noticed how the camp's perimeter was marked, not with weapons but with symbols etched in ash on bark, in stone, in the earth itself, circles, lines, eyes. "Protection?" Tom asked. Taklishim nodded. "Spirit knows where we are." They stopped beneath a pine tree. The boy crouched, drew a shape in the dirt, a spiral with a mark through the middle. "I saw this," Tom murmured. "On the mesa." The boy looked up. Old sign for balance, 2 paths. Tom didn't answer, but something in his chest pulled tight. He knew the meaning wasn't lost on either of them. As they returned to the fire, drums sounded low in the hills, warning drums, faint but unmistakable. The older man stood. "The time has come. We do not fight, but we do not sleep." Tom looked out into the darkness, wind cold on his neck. He knew the fire would not be enough to hold back what came next. When Tom returned to his cabin, the forest was quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. No birdsong, no wind, only a waiting stillness that pressed against his skin. He dismounted slowly, senses sharpened. Something was wrong. The door hung open, one hinge snapped. Inside, the place was wrecked, drawers dumped, bed torn, food scattered across the floor. But what froze him was the fence outside. It was covered in symbols, painted in white ash and red clay, marked with precision and care. Circles intertwined, spirals divided, a handprint, a bird's wing. Every post bore a different mark, and together they pulsed with a strange beauty. Neither threat nor welcome, but something deeper, something sacred. He touched one of the symbols. The wood beneath it was cool, as if it had been touched by rain. But there'd been no rain in days. He knew what it meant. The tribe had passed through, not as a warning, as a gift. They had marked him, not just his fence. Him. But the moment broke with the crack of brush behind him. Tom turned too late. A fist slammed into his side, and he collapsed to his knees, gasping. Eli's voice cut through the silence. "Thought we might find you back here." Tom looked up, chest heaving. 3 men stood around him, Eli, Ross, and Bennett, eyes hard, jaws tight. "You ran off," Eli said, stepping forward. "Warned them, didn't you?" Tom didn't answer. "Coward," Ross muttered. "Traitor," Bennett hissed. Tom tried to stand. "They didn't attack us. That arrow wasn't meant to kill. It was a message. You're marching toward innocent people." Eli didn't flinch. "They drew first blood. Don't care if it was a warning or a whisper. We answer with fire." Tom's voice rose. "You'll start something none of us can finish. You think you're strong because you carry a rifle? That boy you're so afraid of, he's stronger than you'll ever be." Eli's fist hit him across the face. The world tilted. Blood filled his mouth. "Then you can stay out of our way," Eli said coldly, "or die trying." He motioned to the others. They turned and left, boots crunching the earth. Tom stayed down a long while, spitting blood, breathing smoke that wasn't there. When he finally stood, the fence stood with him, silent, marked, watching. He touched the spiral with the line through it, the symbol of 2 paths. He understood now. One was destruction, the other was sacrifice. He wiped the blood from his mouth and looked toward the eastern sky, where the sun would rise over dry hills and stubborn men. He had one more chance to stop it, and maybe just enough strength to try. The sun broke over the horizon like a blade, sharp and searing. Tom rode hard, cutting through scrub and stone, blood crusted on his face, ribs aching with each breath. Every hoofbeat echoed urgency. He had to reach the tribe before Eli's men did. He had to stop the fire before it consumed more than just wood and flesh. By the time he reached the canyon clearing, the Apache camp was gone. Tents dismantled, fires cold. No footprints, no voices. Only the faint scent of smoke and sage lingering in the morning air. But something else remained. Symbols. Carved into tree trunks, drawn in ash on rocks, woven into grass with feathers and bone. They weren't signs of retreat. They were messages, purposeful, measured, protection, passage, closure. And one stood out, painted in deep red clay on a flat stone. The spiral again crossed by a single line. 2 paths, 1 choice. Tom stepped forward, heart heavy, lungs burning. He turned at the sound of boots behind him. Eli and 6 others arrived, rifles in hand, eyes hard. "Where are they?" Eli barked. "Gone," Tom said, voice calm. "They knew we were coming," Ross muttered. "They left in peace," Tom answered. "They knew what you brought." Eli stepped closer. "Don't preach to me, Carver. This was justice. You let them slip through." Tom stood his ground. "You came here to kill. What justice is that?" Eli raised his rifle. "Move." "No." The silence cracked like a whip. Tension snapped tight between them. For a moment, time froze. Then something above them shifted. A hawk screamed overhead, wings slicing the air. It dove low, cutting between men and rifles, stirring dust and panic. Ross flinched, firing a shot into the trees. Another man cursed. In the confusion, Tom lunged, grabbing Eli's arm and twisting. The rifle fired into the dirt. They fell hard, grappling in dust and fury. Eli landed a punch. Tom answered with a blow to the ribs. The others yelled, caught between action and fear. No one fired again. Tom rolled off Eli, coughing. "You think killing them makes you strong? That boy you call a threat. He survived more than you ever will." Eli, panting, spat blood into the dirt. He didn't answer. Behind them, the wind stirred. In the distance, the hawk circled once more, then vanished into the sky. Tom stood slowly, body trembling. "They're gone," he said, "but they left their truth behind, and I carry it now." No one followed when he turned away. No one stopped him when he walked. He didn't win the fight, but he'd drawn the line, and sometimes that was enough. Weeks passed. The lumber camp changed after that morning in the canyon. Men kept to themselves. The air grew quieter, the bravado thinner. Eli didn't speak to Tom again. No one did, not really, but no one raised a hand either. They let him be. Tom didn't stay long. He packed what little he owned, saddled the mule and rode south, closer to the river, where the land softened and the forest gave way to open scrub and sky. There he built a modest cabin by hand, plank by plank, far from the old paths, but not too far from the memories. Sometimes he traded pelts and lumber at the edge of town. Other times he walked the woods alone, learning to listen instead of chop. And sometimes Taklishim came. The boy never said when he'd arrive. He'd just be there, sitting near the fire, watching the smoke rise. They shared simple meals, talked little. But the silence between them felt full, not empty. Tom began learning his language, the real words. Not the ones settlers mocked, but the songs that named the wind and river, the calls of birds and the colors of dawn. In return, he taught Taklishim how to carve with care, how to bind wood, how to read the weather in the bend of a branch. One morning, the boy brought him something, a small wooden figure, hand-carved, worn smooth, a bear upright, with a hawk perched on its shoulder. Tom held it gently. "What does it mean?" he asked. Taklishim looked at him, eyes steady. "Protector." Tom didn't reply, but the word stayed in his chest like a second heartbeat. Seasons shifted, storms came and went. The world kept moving. But here, on this edge of things, peace took root. Not the kind without scars, but the kind that grows despite them. He still dreamed sometimes of smoke, of fire, of lines drawn in the dust. But now when he awoke, it wasn't fear he felt. It was purpose. Tom stood on his porch one evening, watching the sun fall behind the hills, the sky painted in fire and gold. The wind carried a faint sound, wings slicing through air, a hawk circling high. He smiled. For a man who once sought silence to forget, he had found a new kind of quiet, one that remembered. If this story moved you, subscribe now for more unforgettable journeys of the soul in the Old West. Click the next video on your screen for another tale where the wild frontier meets the human heart.